really, she was a fish out of water in Wakanda. So this is our chance to see her in her element, which was very exciting.
Hello, my name is Russ Milheim from The Direct. Thank you guys both for talking to me today about Ironheart,
Thanks for having us.
of
Ross.
course. Oh, and
Here.
congratulations, first and foremost,
Oh, thank you.
on the series. Now, my first question that I wanted to ask about the show is just when it comes to exploring Riri Williams as a character, what were some of the key differences you really wanted to dive into in this show that audiences never saw in Wakanda Forever, where she, debuted?
I mean, one in Wakanda Forever, we just get such a small taste of her. She's an important part to that plot of that story, but we don't actually get to go home with her and see what makes her tick and see her take center stage. So that was already incredibly appealing about the show. And we really do get to go home with her and see Chicago, which is a corner of the MCU we haven't quite seen before. Not to mention, so much of her journey is about trying to get the resources to even make her tech to begin with, and that's what takes her on the journey to begin with.
Really, she was a fish out of water in Wakanda. So this is our chance to see her in her element, which was very exciting.
Was it ever considered to kind of give her classic pink suit in this series?
To be totally honest, no. And part of that is because when you look back to some of the earlier comics, artist Mike Diodato, who was the colorist and artist for the Brian Michael Bendis run, he did this amazing sort of gunmetal gray, almost like Transformers-esque style suit that she built in her dorm room at MIT. And as soon as we saw that, we were like, that's it. And that's and certainly we may see that pink suit in the future. We might build to that the way Tony built to the nanotech, but that's sort of like scrappy. You can tell where each part came from. It came from this junkyard or this car part. That was where we wanted to start her.
Now, I have another specific question for you because, fans love specific things. Where does this show take place on the Marvel timeline? How far after Wakanda, and like where is it relative to something that just happened like Daredevil or Thunderbolts?
I mean, I think Sev, like probably like a good, like less than a year, like between 6 months to a year after Wakanda Forever.
I mean, I'm the guy that was like, wait a minute, Spider-Man Homecoming, the 8 years later, like this doesn't track. So I'm a big guy on like the timeline. That's huge for me. But I will tell you, in developing the show, it was always meant to be like 6 months to a year after Wakanda. I got to be honest, I can't remember how we landed on the seasons, but that was always the intention. And I know that some of the Marvel shows and movies are kind of like floating in the 2020s at different points, but I would call it about 6 months after Wakanda.
So, of course, I have to ask about you guys got to do something that everyone thought was going to happen during WandaVision, but now we finally got it with Mephisto's introduction. Why was Ironheart, the perfect place to introduce such a big villain? And like, how did you strike that balance of how much you wanted to utilize him in the story?
It's a great question, especially the last part is very important, right? Because what you don't want to do is undermine your main villain. We didn't want to undermine Parker and not have him be the ultimate foe that Riri was kind of going up against, because that's who we spent the series with, and that's where a lot of the culminations needed to happen. But there was this understanding that we needed to unpack and uncover the power behind the person or the entity behind Parker's power. And in the comics, as you probably know, it's Dormammu. And so we, of course, spent time tinkering with that idea. But at the end of the day, the thematic relevance that Mephisto offers just fit into our show so perfectly. This notion of a character who is deeply ambitious, and Mephisto as someone who sort of feeds on ambition, like feeds on people's wants and their desires and manipulates. That not only felt inherent to what Parker does, but it also sort of offered this really great kind of culmination for the character of Riri. So it all came from story, but as a fan, certainly it was like the coolest thing ever to get to be, part of the project that introduced him to the MCU.
The conversation behind his appearance. We don't get his true form in this. What was that conversation? And do we ever get really close to like here he is in his full?
I mean, if you watch closely, you actually get a
You get
glimpse
like a
Yeah, for sure. We explored it all. That's the job. You explore every possible version of it, and how much is enough of a tease, how much is too little, how much is too much. And to Zoe's point, we didn't want to overtake what the overall show was about. It was never about a cameo for a cameo's sake, but rather kind of a culmination of what's been happening already, and obviously a sign of what's to come. I do like that we kind of see him in a couple of different scenes take very different tactics to how he presents himself, both physically, his accent, the way he carries himself. It gives you a sign of the things that Sacha's able to do as his character if and when we see him again.